Make up mind. Fight.
Hey there, this is going to be more of a casual filler type of video, as I'm currently in between a lot of different TF2 projects, and a lot of them are really research and footage grabbing intensive. I'm having to play with a lot of different types of weapons for extended periods of time and record footage of all of them, and it's slowing things down a little bit more than I would like, and I kind of just wanted to talk about this unique little frivolous subject. So I hope you sit back, enjoy, put this on in the background while you play TF2 yourself or work on something, and I hope you enjoy the video. I generally think that the item grade mechanic is one of the worst things that TF2 has chosen to add in the past decade or so. Not only does it make it harder for fans of specific items or creators to directly support them, as they can only unbox the items through crates and not buy them on the Manco store anymore, but it also just artificially inflates the price of certain items that really don't need or deserve it, while artificially deflating the price of other much nicer items. In this video, I wanted to talk about some of my favorite mercenary grade cosmetics in TF2. That is, blue cosmetics, the lowest grade available to be unboxed from crates for hats specifically. I want to note we're only going to be talking about hats in this video, as in items that are worn on your character's head that can be unusual, as getting miscs involved would just lead me to say over and over and over again, like, look at this coat for heavy, look at this coat for spy, look at this coat for medic, aren't they cool? And I think hats are generally more interesting to talk about once unusuals are thrown into the conversation. I also want to note that if I choose not to talk about your favorite cosmetic when you have a really expensive unusual of or is a key part of your loadout, I promise you it's not because I hate it or think it's bad or anything. It just doesn't jump out to me in the same way that the ones I'm going to talk about do. Unless your favorite is the dancing doe, in which case, yes, I do hate it. That said, let's begin with the first cosmetic case, being the Gunmetal Cosmetics Collection. The Gunmetal Cosmetics Collection only has one mercenary grade hat, but boy do we hit the ground running with it, as it is the rotation sensation. This is obviously one of the pricier, more desired mercenary grade unusuals in the game, being super expensive, being all class, and completely invalidating the existence of a previous hat in the game, which was the backwards ball cap for Scout. I really like this one, and I think if they were going to make one hat mercenary grade in this case, they made the right choice. Moving on to the Gargoyle Collection from Scream Fortress 2015, we have the Prehistoric Pullover, which is another really nice, really cute all-class hat that gives them a sort of dinosaur-themed Kigu. I know some people don't like hats like this for being too cutesy for TF2's art style, but I think it's really nice, and I think on certain classes like Scout, Pyro, and Engineer it can look really nice. And we also have the Smoky Sombrero, which is a really cool, just generic hat for Engineer. Engineer is one of those classes who struggles to have really nice, like, just generally unthemed hats that really fit well into a lot of loadouts. Moving forward to the Tough Break cosmetic case, we have three really good hats, being the Hat to Kill for Spy, which is one of the more appealing out of Spy's infinite lineup of fedoras and wide brim hats. This one's really cool, it's really wide and really big, which gives it a sort of flair and silhouette that none of his other hats really have. We have the Berlin Brain Bowl for Medic, which is straight up one of my favorite single class hats in the game. If you combine this thing with the Colossal Cranium, your Medic basically wears a full face mask, gas mask kind of thing, and that looks really cool. We'll talk later on in the video about how I think turning the TF2 classes into sort of faceless enigmas is one of the coolest things they can do with hats, and this is one of the earliest examples in the game of them doing that. And of course, we have the Patriot Peak, which is insane that this thing is both mercenary grade and was introduced this early. This thing is pretty much the team captain for the modern generation. It's super pricey, unusual, one of the most desired hats in the game. So the fact that it is mercenary grade and can theoretically be unboxed more easily than some other single class hats is pretty crazy to think about. Jumping forward a few cases to the Rainy Day pack, we have a triple whammy of really good hats, being the Blast Defense for Demo Man, which I know some people don't like. I know it's kind of low tier, but once again, I just like turning the TF2 mercs into faceless warrior kind of things. I think it's really cool and adds a bit of mystery to the person you're fighting, even if we know exactly what they look like. We have the Field Practice for Medic, which is another really cool, just generic medic hat that I think could go really well with some of those more military-esque themed medic loadouts. And we have the War Hood for Heavy, which is infamously edgy, but is one of Heavy's better hats that was added before he started getting really good ones a few years ago. In the Jungle Inferno update, we got the Abominable Cosmetics Collection, which added quite a few really good single-class mercenary grade hats. We obviously have the Nuke, the Duke Nukem hat for Heavy and Soldier that's really good. I was honestly surprised this one was mercenary grade because this thing is actually pretty expensive, unusual. It goes without saying though, people love Duke Nukem and it's just a great hat for Heavy and Soldier. We have the Classy Capper for Sniper, which is just a really cool kind of fedora variant for Sniper that, as its name implies, is quite classy and dapper and looks really good with the right loadout. And we have the Shell Mitt for Soldier, which is a neat neat little variation on Soldier's default hat that's similar to the sniper one. I think goes good with certain loadouts, and it's just all around really cool. Jumping all the way to winter 2017, we have the Brass Bucket, which again is a hat that turns a class into a faceless knight kind of thing, but in this case, it's a knight, which is cool because knights are cool. Dark Souls is cool. Faceless knight characters are badass, and turning the Soldier of all TF2 classes into one of those is something that I'm very into. We also have the Polar Bear for Heavy, and Heavy infamously suffers from not having many very good generic hats that just fit into all sorts of different loadouts and aren't themed or silly in any way, and I think the Polar Bear is one of the better ones in that regard. You could fit this thing with a lot of Heavy's different coats and beards and all around make it look really cool. Jumping forward to the Violet Vermin collection in Scream Fortress 10, we have 3 really good hats, this time being the Vampire Vanquisher for Soldier, which is an obvious Simon Belmont reference that I think is really neat, one of my favorite hats in the game, especially considering that Soldier has a whip item that he can use. We have the Murderer's Motif for Spy, which is a cool Zorro-esque hat that's a little more dynamic than just another generic wide-brimmed hat for him. This one's also got the mask and everything, so it's got a little bit more going on. And we have the Highway Star for Sniper, which is a fun little boomer bandana and mustache and long hair. I know some people don't like this one because it makes a sniper look like women want me, fish fear me, all I want to do is grill kind of American boomer, but I think it's really neat. I think it works well on Sniper as a funny little hat. The name is very cool because it's obviously a reference to a song, but could also be a JoJo reference depending on how weeby you are, and I think this version all around looks better and fits the class more than the Scouts version of the same concept in the throttle head. Jumping to winter 2018, we have one hat, which is probably my favorite hat from this entire video, being the Snow-Capped. The Snow-Capped is so cool. It's such a badass cosmetic for, well, the medic. It's got a beard, a cool hat, a little flat cap with a little medic logo on it. This one just covers so much ground, and if they were to split this into 2 or 3 separate cosmetics, I would probably realistically buy them all. The fact that this is all on one hat and it's mercenary grade is crazy. I can totally understand why this is one of the more pricey mercenary grade medic unusuals. Jumping to winter 2019, we have quite a few hats to talk about, starting with the Yule Hog. This one's obviously really silly, but if you're one of those TF2 players who doesn't care about making cool badass loadouts, then I think the Yule Hog is a great hat to add to your loadout just to look kind of funny. Plus, comboing it with the ham shank and becoming a full meat warrior is a very funny concept that I have seen people do. I'm pretty sure there's multiple different YouTube videos of people doing just that. Valve knew what they were doing adding this hat, and I'm 100% here for it. We also have the Citizen Kane, which is funny because it pretty much invalidated the Doctor's Dapper Topper. It's just the same team-colored stripes and white hat combo with also some funny little glasses added that kind of fits the Dr. Seuss theme, but also gives kind of a Willy Wonka vibe. It's a cool hat that I think can coexist alongside the Doctor's Dapper Topper and filling that wacky niche. Moving forward to summer 2022, we have 2 hats I want to talk about, this time being the California Cap for Scout, which in my opinion is a nice low-tier Scout unusual that you can actually get really cheap that I think can theoretically work into a lot of loadouts. This is one that's also got multiple parts to it between the hat, the glasses, and the hair, and once again, if they were to split this into multiple different cosmetics, I could totally see people comboing them all together. We also have the Firefighter for Pyro, which is another epic haha gaming reference, this time being obvious reused Street Fighter hair for the Pyro. It's really cool. I think it's a fun themed cosmetic, and the name is A+. This is one of the funniest, most apt item names in TF2, and I think if you combo this hat with the right Pyro cosmetic, you can get a really cool fighting game themed loadout. Also works really well with Pyro's Hadouken taunt. Moving forward to the summer 2021 pack, we have exactly 3 hats to talk about, and I think this is one of the strongest sets all around that the game has ever introduced as far as mercenary grade hats go. We have the 1,000-Yard Stare, which is just a very funny hat for Soldier. I can understand if some people who are more partial to having a cool, badass, militaristic Soldier wouldn't like this one. Putting some googly eyes on the Soldier's hat is just a funny way to make a cosmetic and works so well in giving him a silly little air. I really like this hat. And we have 2 of my favorite hats in the game, which I am genuinely surprised are mercenary grade, being the Wild Brim Slouch and the Brim of Fire. The Wild Brim Slouch genuinely kicks ass. This is one of the main reasons I wanted to make this video, to gas this hat up. The Wild Brim Slouch is just really cool. Not only is it a really nice wide-brimmed hat for Sniper that curves upward to give him a cool sort of cowboy hat look, not only is it made out of crocodile skin with crocodile teeth, but also just fits the Sniper's theming and fits into so many loadouts so well that I'm genuinely surprised you can get this hat unusual with good effects for like $20. If you want a good cheap Sniper unusual, go after the Wild Brim Slouch. You will not be disappointed. And similarly, the Brim of Fire fits a lot of the same concepts for Pyro, except is a cool fire-themed cowboy hat. If this thing were a pink hat or even a red hat, I would be able to realistically understand and see it. And the fact that it's mercenary grade just allows you to get this really badass cowboy hat for Pyro super cheap. Jumping to Scream Fortress 13 with the Crimson Cash collection, we've got a few hats to talk about, starting with the Twisted Topper. This one is pretty much the gothic version of the Doctor's Dapper Topper or Citizen Kane, just being a cool tall top hat with stripes that really suits the Halloween theme well. This one gives me the vibe of like dollar store Halloween decorations with the black and orange and the pumpkin and the bat collar. It's a really neat hat, and one that I'm surprised can be bought as cheap as it can, considering how nice it is for a Halloween hat. We also have, obviously, the Hat Out of Hell, which is similar to the backwards ball cap, except slightly more edgy. This is one that I see a lot of people have unusual that they really enjoy. I'm unsure of how expensive this one is, but if it was one of the pricier mercenary grade hats, I would not be surprised. This seems like the kind of hat the TF2 community would eat up. And moving forward to Winter 2021, this was an infamously lackluster case. This is when a lot of people started getting really fatigued with Valve constantly adding the same elf and Santa and reindeer and horn and antler and Christmas light cosmetics. But there is one in this case that I do really enjoy, and that is the Mushenka for Heavy. This is such a fun concept. Just giving the Heavy a Yushenko with moose horns on it is such a visceral and in character for Heavy concept. The fact that its name is the Moose Shenka is such a fun pun that works on multiple levels. If you want to view this as a bull hat instead, then the moo in it could cue into that, or if you want to view it as a moose hat, then obviously Moose Shenka. And I all around think this hat is really nice and one of the better low tier Heavy unusuals you could scoop up for the price. In the Ghoulish Gains collection, introduced in Scream Fortress 14, we have a few hats to talk about. The first one being the Nightbane Brim, which is one of my favorite Demo Man hats in the game. This is one of the pricier single class blue unusuals you can get in the game, and I think it makes perfect sense. If you want to make a Bloodborne loadout or a Van Helsing loadout for your Demo Man, this is the hat to do it with. And if you can get this thing with the right Halloween unusual effect, then it will look sick. On top of that, we have the Morgun Marshal for Engineer, which, like we talked about earlier, is a cool generic unthemed engineer hat that can fit well into a lot of loadouts and generally looks really nice for what it is. And lastly, we have the Starlight Sorcerer, which is just a fun little wizard hat for all classes. I really like wizard hats. I think they're a fun aesthetic, and TF2 has a surprisingly small amount of them that are available unusual. Obviously, the point and shoot exists, but Musel kind of had a monopoly on that thing, so adding the Starlight Sorcerer as a blue all-class wizard hat is a fun little thing to introduce to the game. I'm into it. Next up, we have Winter 2022, which has exactly two hats I want to talk about, both being for Engineer, which are the Arctic Mole and the Soft Heart hat. I know the Arctic Mole is based off of a specific character from a specific old obscure Disney movie. It's specifically based on Treasure Planet, I believe, but it's a neat little Yushenka for Engineer, and the goggles really add to the overall aesthetic of this being like a rustic steampunk sort of hat. And the Soft Heart hat is just funny. I like how it looks vaguely similar to the Mining Light, but its colors and texture are just off enough that when you see it, you can immediately tell what it is. I'm into it. This is a cool hat. And finally, we have Summer 2023, the most recent major TF2 update, which added one hat I want to discuss, being the Brimmed Bootlegger. I know it's kind of a meme that Scout has a lot of fedoras, like a lot. Him and Spy probably have the most fedoras in the game, but I think the Brimmed Bootlegger is really neat. It's a nice wide brim hat that's at an off angle for Scout, and I think when combined with the right cosmetic, like the Prohibition Opposition or the Cool Cat cardigan, it can give you a nice sort of retro noir themed Scout that looks really cool. And yeah, that's the small collection of mercenary grade blue hats in TF2 that I think are underrated and deserve to be higher tier. I realize this video was a little bit frivolous and a little bit pointless, and I'm sure some people will walk away from this feeling like their time was wasted, but I just wanted to gas up some hats I think people sleep on and wanted to get some TF2 content out while I was working on bigger content. Hope you all enjoyed regardless, hope you have a fantastic day before, during, and after watching or listening, and I'll catch you all later. Thanks and cheers.